We continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah Hilchos Netilas Yadaim. We're in the middle of Siman Kuf Samoch Beis, and we pick it up with the Sif Dalet. Says the Mechaber in Sif Dalet, Shofach Amayim Al Yada, you pour water on your hands, Achas on one of them, Vishiv Shifa Bechaverta, and then you rub the other hand. A unfortunate, very common occurrence. Says the Mechaber, Loi also Loi Netila. Afilu, even if Shafach Achroin Al Shtei Yadav, even if afterwards you pour on both hands. What's the reason? Explains the Mechaber, Lefi Shamayim Sheshafach Al Yadai Achas, as we've seen so many times. The first waters that you poured on that first hand, Nitma'u, became tamei. Then when you touch the other hand, it makes the other hand tamei. Now the second pour does not make it tar. It only can be metayr the water that became tamei from the hand itself, but not that which became tamei from the other hand. Hilkach, therefore. If you pour a kli onto your hand, and you touch the other hand, what do you have to do? You have to dry your hands, and then wash it again. Therefore, so when you wash your hands, someone should pour the water on you. Says the Mechaber, not everyone has a servant. If you don't have someone else, you should touch the kli with the tips of your fingers, and you should pour on your two hands as one. And here it is, we should be keeping a tally how many times. This is the eitzah, that you pour on each hand a full revius. Either, again, number one is you hold the cup with the tips of your fingers, you don't touch each other's hand. Or then you're going to pour on both hands together as one. Or yishach hakolach revius, pour a full revius. And then rub them together. Why? So we know already why. Because if you rub a full revius, if you pour full revius, then the water doesn't come tamei. You don't need more water to be mitahirit. Because when you pour revius at one time, is considered kemai tvila, like sticking your hands into the mikvah. You don't need to dip it two times. In let's leave Naga B'Macher. We'll see how much time we have after we get through the Mishnah Berurah. So again, we're discussing the very common scenario that after you wash one hand, that hand touches your other hand. The Mechaber is going to continue with what happens if someone else touches you or you touch someone else. We'll get there in a moment or in the next year. Let's see how much time we have. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if got to Lamed Beis, Shavach Mayim v'chulu Mayim, we're discussing Shavach Rak Mayim Rishonim, that you pour the first waters, mix as miravias, a little bit from the revius, Al Yarachas on one hand, V'shiv Shva B'shniya She'enan Netula, and you touch the other hand, which was not washed. You made a mistake, and you thought pouring on one hand works with the other hand, by rubbing the other hand. And if you rubbed it, just remove the perspiration, or other dirt from the second hand, or you just touched the other hand, like we said. It doesn't have to be you purposely went to rub it. In none of these cases, if it's the second hand, even the first hand is tamei because you touched your second hand, which is tamei. Nitmus if got la medal the maim rishon chashuvin tameim, the first waters are tamei. Nitmu be'eis and atila, because they become tamei by touching v'nigasa b'yad the canal with sif beis, as we have seen. Sheshif shva nitmeis, therefore when you rub it becomes tamei. If got la medei v'gara al yedei tomazu shekibla ata yoiser. This is worse. Me'imlai yadaim the tulas klal. Ironically, You would think, I washed one hand, how could it be worse? It's even worse if you didn't wash your hands at all. Because when you have tamei waters that comes on your hand, it's never become tar until you dry it off. Meaning, if you start with hands that are tamei and you pour water in it, that water becomes tamei, but then it gets washed over the next water. But over here, when I pour water on my hand, that water is now tamei. When I touch my other hand, now the level of tumah that there is cannot be washed off. The only way to fix this now is by drying your hands and starting again. Chaverta sifkat lamavav u'memela. Gami atzman it makes it itself as tamei sarch l'nagvim gamkin. You got to dry both hands. Because they both came tamei via touch. If you had a shniyat tamei, the second tamei hand. Umayim hashni made him mitarim, and the second waters are not mitar. Elo toma sayad atzma, only the toma of the water itself. Avaloi me'at toma shaba aleim imakam acher, not the toma that comes from elsewhere, as we just explained. And therefore, because the second washing will not be mitar, that water memela, and therefore, hu adin kishavach mayim rishanim l'shtei yadav. Similarly, if you pour the first waters on both hands, kolachas v'vnei atzav v'shivshav zeh, but then you rub them nitzu zeh mizeh again. If it's less than a ravias, it's going to make each other tummy. It's not going to help to pour more water on. Hilkach. Therefore, what should you do to remedy this situation? Because it became tamei, alkein, so you got to dry your hands, and wash again. As we've seen, all the water in the world pouring many times will not to be mitayar this tamei. You got to dry and start again, and that's the reason why. What's the eitzah sivkat lamachas lefika chanoitel ratzaleimar. So once we explain that you have to be careful not to touch the other hand before you finish washing, and then it's very common. Al-Kain, what should you do? One of three avenues, like we spoke about when we read the Machaber. Number one, someone else should pour Ravias in your hands at once. Or you yourself pour Ravias on both hands simultaneously. You pour a full Ravias in each hand, one at a time. Because via such a pouring, it makes the hand fully tar. And touching it will not be mekalkel. In such a scenario, once each hand is a full Ravias, then it's a mitzvah to rub it off and make it fully tar. If someone else should pour on your two hands together, both consider one hand. They won't become tamei. They touch each other while washing. And if you don't have someone else to pour the water on you, what do you do now? When you have someone else, it's better to have someone else pour on you than to do yourself. Better than holding the cups with the tips of your fingers and trying to pour on both hands together. This is difficult. It's difficult to pour in a way that it's going to on your hands and on your fingertips. This would suffice with one revius. And then you would not need second waters to retire it. Or, and perhaps this third eitzah is the easiest one. Again, eitzah number one is someone else pouring you. Eitzah number two is you pour on yourself, two hands at the same time. Or eitzah number three, sivkata membez, yishakalachas revius. Of course, this is only an easier eitzah in our world that we, Baruch Hashem, have plentiful amounts of water, so we could afford to pour all four revius in on each hand. What does that mean? Says you hold the kli regularly. You pour on each hand by itself. Revius of azachas. The initial revius rakal yadachas will did on one hand to kabel tamali. Then he goes with chaverta. So will become tamei by touching the friend which didn't get the water poured on it. Now, once each hand gets its own revius of Gadam and Gimel, Al Kol and Iskel El Kaitz, going back on everything we said in all three avenues, or it's a Leimar. Now we don't have to worry anymore by touching the hands. Therefore, the best is to now rub them through. Via this, Nigmru, Kol Tahira Yadayim, it completes the Tahira of Hashem Yichshash Klal. Now we're no longer worried at all that one is going to touch the next. Before we finished the Mishnah Berurah over here, which is going to discuss if someone else touches your hand, let's continue with the Dirshu. If we could find it, says the Dirshu. Here we go. Number 28, that someone else pours revius on both your hands together simultaneously. The Shulchan Aruch previously said, "Im natal shtei yadav ka'acha shteim nachshavas ki'arech," consider one hand. V'shavein mitamim zu b'zu, and they're not going to be tummy each other, as we just saw. Says the Dirshu note number 30 over here. It's consider one hand. But it says the Shulchan Aruch, whether you put your hands zu besad zu or zu agav zu, fil yadayim shal arba chamishim bnei adam, tamid achshavas ki'arecha ve'ein ataz zu zu. Whether you put your hands together, one on top of the other, they all consider one hand. And this is what we have seen, that you can have multiple people put their hands together and have one revius poured on top of all of them. Their hands are touching. It's all considered one hand. And now it's going to suffice with one revius, and you don't need the second waters. In this scenario that you poured two hands at one time, your part for the second Netilas, says the Chazon Ish, there still is makom to be machmir, to use two reviuses, to be choshish for the paiskim, that you have to wash your full hand, not just the fingers, and therefore potentially you need two reviusim, and when you use one revius, is not going to be enough. And again, as we pointed out, our cups are definitely large enough that they hold multiple reviuses. Note number 32, you pour each hand its own revius. What do you gain by this? Once you pour a full revius on it, the water that's on your hands is tar water. And therefore, you don't now have to be concerned with it touching, because the waters are not tameh, rather the waters themselves are tahar. Therefore, you don't have to be worried about beis bamir tzifus, and then dry them, then rub them off. The Magen Avraham explains, okay, let's leave this. We're just going to make these complicated. So far, so good. Let's continue. Says the Mechaber. Now, what happens as we wrap up Sif Dalid? If someone else touches your hands, if he didn't wash his hands, while your hands are still wet, you got to dry them and wash again. Because you have water in your hands and therefore they become tummy. Therefore, the third pour, which is the second in our world, because the first is just to remove the filth. Don't touch each other. Again, pour in same time. If you use a full revius, then it's not a problem at all. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Memhei, even though you already used the second water, so very important. We keep on saying that washing with a full revius saves all issues. It does not save you from this problem. So if one went and one did use a full revius, but then his friend touched his hands before he dried them, that is going to be a problem. Note number 32 over here points out, let's say the Eitzav Yishtach Lito Yadav and Nimsav Makar Shechayshesh, he's afraid to remove his ring. No, what does this have to do with what we're discussing? Afraid to remove his rings. I don't know why this is here. Yeah, this is Siman Kuf Samach Aleph. We are in Kuf Samach Beis. Don't know what that Dirshu note number 33 is doing here. I believe that's the wrong page of Dirshu. And I apologize, but we're going to have to leave that. Maybe we'll find it in a minute. Okay, 1 second. Sifkat membav al yidei hamayim ratzolaymar. Shamayim shetim minigasam etam yadayim. The water became tamei. Shem shneim sifkat mem zayin. Shar yishayim bayim. Rak l'asra lechel. The first one comes just to remove the lechel. Now sif beis. Sifkat mem ches. Then you have to be careful. Shlo yiga. You have to be careful. Shlo yiga yabe chaverta shechaverta kishein aleha. Rak mayim rishayim. Haloi Tameim Mutamis the Rishon, as we've seen, they're going to tell me something else. Because they have it in Naga. Yesharim Zerach Lanagva. Recognizing Achamayim Aleh Pamachas, just pour another time to keep Chekvar Haya Tayrim the Gamri. Fshinitu Miyada Cheres Manimayim Shnim Latara. Now it could help. The Yesharim the Gamba Zem. Sharach Lanagni Kamay Benaga Bohem Acher, as if someone else touched them. But if you use the full Revius of Katam Mchas, Inzal L'chol Zera Tzalema. As we written previously, you don't need the second time. As we just pointed out, still you do have to be careful. A very big savior. Then you remember, excuse me, not a very big savior. You got to wash your hands again without a brach. Im not like kli biyad alecha hainu biyad yamin sheshav chalem etzchila b'machas biyad asmalis nitma oizen kli. The kli itself comes tamei amayim sheishal yadai the mayim yishanim tameimim. Because as we've seen, that water on your hand, if it's not oravius, is tamei water, and then what happens? V'mchazar v'achso biyad asmalit lido b'am shniya yamim. Then you pick it up the left hand again. If the other day says we got to dry it. Again, wash with a full revius asachas. Al kol yad v'yad. Al kol yad v'yad. Or don't go back and forth. This is the reason why you don't go back and forth, or else you can make it tamei. But again, as long as you wash with a full revius, you will not run into this issue. But the one issue we do have to be cognizant of, even when washing with the full revius, we see right now, is that one still cannot allow someone else that did not wash his hands yet to touch your hands, as that would potentially make the water tamei. Make your hands, tamei, and require you to wash your hands again.